Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Oh, I see Mom's already here waiting. It's 1 o'clock. Look at that, Mom. I'm on time. Imagine that. Okay. Whew. So today I will be reading all of chapter 5. Um, Hi, Noah. How are you? I know I'm funny, right, Mom? Anyway, sorry, I'm drinking a little tea before I read. So good. I'm glad you're good. Noah. Okay, so I'm not sure who's tuned in. I see my mom and Noah are here. I'm going to be reading chapter 5. I just want to, before I begin, talk a little bit about the book just for a minute or two. I know someone's probably timing me. Um, so, um, so this is a true story based on Leon's life, and it is about the Holocaust, which is a very, very serious and very sad event in our world history. And so I think it's important to discuss that the things that will be happening in the next couple of chapters are very serious and they are very sad. So if you are someone who is prone to not enjoying very sad books, you should probably not listen to the rest of the story because here on out it starts to get a little bit more worse and a little bit more sad, the things that happen. The reason I read this book is because I think it's important for us to learn from history. And you know what they say, if we do not learn from our history, then it tends to repeat itself until we learn. So I read this book for several reasons. One reason is to encourage people that in life, things are going to be very, very hard and very difficult. And so even when things are hard and difficult, there's a way to get through it. And you'll see Leon, of course, we all know he survives because he is part of making this book. So I don't have any spoilers there. But I just want you to know that through all of this, Leon does make it. And in his life, after he experiences the Holocaust, he does go on to lead a productive and actually a good life and something that contributes to society. So through all the bad things that we go through, I'm not sure if anything can compare to what he's going to be going through. At least I hope I never have to endure what he went through. We also read the book A Long Walk to Water. That is also a book of encouragement, of hope, that through everything that you go through, that you have to have hope. And if you don't have hope, then things aren't looking good and things won't be good. So, so I just want to give you a heads up about the book, that it's going to start getting a little bit more detailed, a little bit more difficult to hear the things that happen to the Jewish people. But like I said, the reason I read this book is because I firmly believe that we need to learn from history. And if we don't learn from history, if we don't know history, then we might be destined to repeat it. And I really would hope that this sort of thing never happens again. So I will be reading chapter 5. You'll see what happens. I will read all of chapter 5, so it might be a little lengthy. I'm sure maybe some of you guys will sign out and in. But anyway, hi, Lucas. I see you joined us. Sorry, I was in the middle of my speech. You know how I am. So got my glasses on because I have to have them to read. Okay, so we left off with yesterday, they were sent to the ghettos. And sorry, I'm trying to adjust my camera. So they were sent to the ghettos. And when they were sent to the ghettos, it was a place in the city where 5,000 people normally lived. And they were putting 15,000 people in this area. When they entered, the walls around it, the tops of the walls were rounded, like if you've ever seen like headstones or gravestones. And they noticed that that was just some other kind of twisted and sick way of the Nazis to show the Jews that they will probably be sentenced to death, that they will die there, which is really, really obviously really sad. So that's where you left off. And we left off with Leon saying what his family says through this whole thing. If this is the worst that happens. And then he said, last thing he said, if only. Chapter 5. Someday I will take you to America where my son lives, Mr. Luftig promised me. Remember, Mr. Luftig is their, when they got to the apartment that they were supposed to have, Mr. and Mrs. Luftig were already in the apartment. And so what they decided to do is just split the apartment in half, put a sheet down, and the Luftigs would live on one side, and then Leon's family would live on the other side. So someday I will take you to America where my son lives, Mr. Luftig promised me as we sat together cleaning his pipes on his side of the blanket dividing the apartment. In my first year in the ghetto, I often sat down beside Mr. Luftig. A patient and generous man in his mid-50s, Mr. Luftig loved to tell me stories about his son's life in New York City, a fantasy land of endless opportunities, an abundance of food, and few restrictions against Jews. Once his 7 or 8 pipes were clean, Mr. Luftig proudly lined them up on a table. I stared at his collection with admiration. There were straight pipes, curved pipes, and even a pipe with a lid on it. It didn't matter that Mr. Luftig had no tobacco to put in them. The pipes symbolized an orderly and civilized world beyond the control of the Nazis. Mrs. Luftig was a quiet, uncomplaining woman. She and my mother became friendly and sometimes shared the cooking duties. Working together in those hopeless conditions somehow lessened the despair. What went on inside our apartment was replicated thousands of times in the ghetto as we struggled to keep our lives and our dignity in the face of random killings, devastating diseases, worn-out clothing, and near starvation. Since some 15,000 people were jammed into an area meant to house 5,000 at most, the sanitation system was deplorably inadequate. The indoor plumbing we had once taken for granted was now an unattainable luxury. Lines were long for the few outhouses, and in the winter, by the time I finished, my feet were nearly frozen. The crowding, poor nutrition, and lack of hygiene, made the disease rampant. From typhus to scarlet fever, from malnutrition to psychosis, illness of some kind struck nearly every family. To Nazi eyes, we Jews were a single detested group, the exact opposite of the blonde, blue-eyed, pure Aryans. In reality, we are not their opposites at all. Plenty of Jews had blue eyes and blonde hair, and many Germans and Austrians, including Adolf Hitler, had dark eyes and hair. But Nazi dogma grouped Jews as one, as the loathed enemy of the Aryans. For them, being Jewish was not about what we believed, but about our so-called race. It made no sense to me, and I even wondered how Nazis could believe such contradictions themselves. Had they taken the time to really look at us, they would have seen human beings just like themselves, some with blue eyes, some with brown. They would have seen families just like their own, sons and daughters, mothers, fathers, doctors, lawyers, teachers, craftsmen and tailors, individuals from all walks of life. The Nazis had forced us into impossibly crowded conditions designed to bring out the worst in people. Despite everything against us, we remained determined to show respect and decency toward one another. Retaining our humanity, cherishing our heritage, we fought the depravity of the Nazis with subtle forms of resistance. Rabbis resisted by conducting services on Jewish holy days. Doctors and nurses resisted by fighting to save the lives of the ill and injured and by bringing new life into the world. Actors and musicians resisted by creating makeshift stages in hidden courtyards and performing plays and skits and holding concerts, affirming that beauty and culture could even exist in the midst of the horrible circumstances of the ghetto. Hi, Maren. I see you there. So it kind of reminded me a little bit about what's happening. Our world is nothing like my dog's distracting me. What, Lucy? What do you want? You can't come up here. Oh boy, hold on a minute. Come here. Okay, so yes, this is my dog. Everybody say hi, Lucy. Okay, so you have to sit down. So stop it. So it kind of reminded me that part of today's world where we're not supposed to be going outside. We're supposed to be, in our houses, and how our musicians and actors have have come into our living rooms, basically being live on the internet, and I think it's pretty cool. So, in the face of adversity, what we're going through in America right now, people have come together and used their skills. So musicians are singing online. Nurses and doctors are doing their thing. Teachers are still trying to do our things. So it's like everybody's trying to come together to help each other rather than against each other in times of need. So yes. Oh, hi, Maddie. How are you? Yeah, Lucy is quite the girl. You can see her. Hi, Lucy. All right. Okay. All right. Are you gonna lay down? Okay. Sorry about the interruption. You know how it is with life. Okay. So where was I at? Let's see. Sorry about that. Oh yes, the knots. I already said that. Sorry. I remember chinning myself up on top of the fence to see one such comedy show filled with gallows humor. Even when I didn't quite get the jokes, I laughed anyway because it was a way to show the Nazis they did not control me. It also made me feel better for just a few minutes. Jews resisted the bleak surroundings by sharing their hopes and dreams and stories with one another, as Mr. Luftig did to me. Seriously. My dog. Some people resisted by falling in love. Hold on one second. All right, David, you need to go down here. Say goodbye, Lucy. All right, there we go. Oh, stop. Now she's barking at me. I tell you what. Sorry about that. All right, let's try this again, shall we? Oh my. Some people resisted by falling in love. Couples courted and married. Babies were born, romances blossomed despite the oppression that surrounded us. It happened to my brother Salig. He fell in love with Miriam, the daughter of a brushmaker who lived with her family in an apartment building behind ours. For my 17-year-old brother, romance was an entirely new experience and a wonderful diversion from the ghastliness of our ghetto life. For me, his romance wasn't quite as positive, since it now meant I had to share my brother with someone else. As a result, I could get a little mean. Her face is pretty, but I don't like her legs, I once griped to Salig, as if he had asked my opinion. He could have gotten mad or defensive, but instead he just laughed and nudged me on the shoulder, saying, "One day you won't be so critical when it comes to girls." With that, he was off again to meet Miriam, to stroll hand in hand, maybe to make plans for a future life together. During Salig's absences, I found ways to keep myself busy. I went to a secret Hebrew school in a rabbi's darkened apartment. I made friends with other boys my age, including Yassel and Samuel, whose father, Mr. Birch, was a shoemaker. They lived in the apartment below ours. My friends and I played cards and explored the maze of alleyways in the area. We staged spontaneous shows of our own in the courtyard behind our building, and I mimicked a comedy routine with a hat teetering on my head. I suspect my imitation was pretty poor, but my friends laughed all the same. I even taught myself, sort of, how to ride a bike. A man in our building had a bike parked outside his apartment. One day, he asked me to clean it for him. In exchange, he promised to let me take it for a spin. Oh boy. Though I had never ridden a bike, I was intrigued. After I finished scrubbing and polishing the bike, I climbed on, stretching my legs to reach the pedals, and wobbled a few feet before falling over. I got back on, and when I finally thought I had gained my balance, I pushed off on what was my boldest attempt, steering around the corner and gaining speed. I felt almost airborne flying down the street. For those few seconds, I was not a prisoner in a Nazi ghetto, trapped behind high walls, but a 12-year-old boy like any other, relishing the mix of danger and excitement. Not even the inevitable end to my ride, when I crashed to the pavement, gashing my forehead, dampened my spirits or my enthusiasm. Such diversions were precious few. I spent most of my time focused on the critical task of finding food. Every day I combed the sidewalks and alleys looking for a crust of bread or anything else edible in the attempt to combat my constant hunger. It's hard to believe that my family survived even the first weeks of the ghetto, given how little food we had. My mother concocted a variety of soups, all with water as the main ingredient. And my father, whose work permit allowed him to leave the ghetto to work in Schindler's factory several blocks away, tried to bring back a potato or a piece of bread. I still remember standing by his side every evening as he emptied out his pockets, praying that buried in the lining might be some extra food we could share. Sometimes food was available on the black market, but one had to have something to exchange. The Nazis provided limited amounts of bread, but not much else. Mr. Birch, the shoemaker downstairs, had dealings outside the ghetto. One day he returned from a customer with a Polish dish of jellied chicken feet. Hey, listen, when you're hungry, you'll eat anything, apparently even jellied chicken feet. Not me today, though. Although they had little enough themselves, the family shared their meal with me. Even with a special treat like that, my raging appetite didn't subside. I was hungry, really hungry, all the time. Sleep became my only relief. The only time I wasn't thinking about eating, but frequently visions of food filled my dreams. Okay, hold on 1 second. Oh my gosh, my dog. Hold on, I'll be right back. Come on, let's go. What is this? Seriously? She's a brat. Abby, your sister is a brat. Okay, I'm back. I really don't know what she was all excited about. I'm really sorry to have to leave you. Dogs. Okay. I don't even know what she was barking at. I thought maybe she had to go outside, but apparently she was just excited to go out to the kitchen. I don't know. Oh, boy. Okay. Where was I? Oh, yes. Food again. Chicken feet, pickled chicken feet. And then sleep became his only relief because it was the only time he didn't think about eating. My family had already spent our safety net of gold coins, and my father's savings had disappeared. All we had left to barter were the last of my father's suits. When we were most desperate, father once again asked his friend Wojak, who lived outside the ghetto, to sell one on the black market. As before, after taking a cut for himself, Wojak gave us the remaining coins. Other Jews were better off than we were. Some had come to the ghetto with money or jewelry that they could trade for food. A wealthy woman in the apartment above ours occasionally asked me to run errands for her. One day when I returned to her apartment, she took out an entire loaf of bread and cut off a thick slice as my payment. I watched in astonishment as she liberally spread butter over the bread. It never occurred to me to eat this unexpected treasure all by myself. Instead, I took it straight home to my mother. She scraped off the butter, cut the bread into thinner slices, and then spread the butter on each smaller piece. The whole family shared in this rare treat. That was a good day. It makes me so sad. It makes me thankful for the food that I have, even when you open up the fridge and say, there's nothing to eat here. And then this, his whole family sharing like a small section of bread, and it was a treat. Without valuables of our own, my family's only hope to fend off starvation was work. Since work meant food, maybe soup at lunchtime, and sometimes a small chunk of bread to take home. Each of us contributed however we could. In return for food, Sally continued to repair hot plates and other electrical items. Later on, he worked in Miriam's father's small brush making business, which produced all kinds of brushes, bottle brushes, shoe brushes, and large brushes for scrubbing. He also did piecework at home, earning a little money or food for each item he produced. Paisha worked at the electrical company outside the ghetto, and from time to time, she too brought back bread or a potato or two. My mother cleaned the offices of the Jewish Council and of the Nazis whose had offices inside the ghetto. One day, my father summoned the courage to ask Schindler to hire my brother David, then 14, to work in his factory, and Schindler agreed. Every day, father and David would leave and return together, sometimes with morsels of food or a piece of coal. Now I stood between them each evening, hoping against hope that their pockets weren't empty. Thanks to Sally, who was also looking out for me, I too started working for the brush maker, stringing bristles through a board to make brushes for the Germans. Since I was only 12, it might seem that I was young to be working full time, but I didn't think of myself as a child anymore. No one did. I needed to contribute to my family's survival any way I could. Did our family talk about the future or make contingency plans in case the conditions got worse? In fact, we didn't. We couldn't think 2 minutes ahead when all our energy was concentrated on surviving to the next day. We stayed in the moment, determined to make it through the day unharmed. I kept up my single-minded obsession with finding food to the point where I had no time or room in my mind for other thoughts. Our goal was staying alive long enough for the Germans to lose the war and leave defeated. My father had been terrified for our safety, but he kept his feelings hidden behind an impenetrable expression. He rarely spoke and some days barely acknowledged us. He would return from a long day of work, empty his pockets of whatever he had been able to get, and then collapse into bed. In contrast, Mr. Luftig remained outwardly cheerful. If we had a piece of coal burning in the oven, he would sit in front of it and warm his hands with one of his pipes dangling from his mouth. That was his greatest pleasure, even though the pipe was empty. Sometimes my mother would break the silence and state what we were all thinking. How will we make it through the winter? I had absolutely no idea. At Schindler's factory, my father picked up rumors about the war from the Gentile workers. He pieced together about different bits of information from which he could track the movements of the German army and speculate on what the Allied forces in Europe, led by Great Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union, no longer partnering with Germany, might be planning. Although we continued to hope the German army would soon be defeated, we couldn't begin to know what would happen next. The scraps of information we received were frequently contradictory. Kind of like when all this started, information we were receiving that is happening in our world was all kind of like, well, they said this and someone said this, and it's contradictory. I mean, it's kind of like they go against each other. You're trying to figure out what facts are true and what facts aren't. Sorry, I need to sip on my tea. In May 1942, we had our first taste of the even worse suffering to come. The Nazis announced there would be a transport from the ghetto to the countryside and encouraged us to volunteer to leave the overcrowded, unsanitary conditions for the fresh air and open spaces. Some 1,500 Jews volunteered to go, thinking that anything must be better than the squalid environment they were in. By June, however, the Nazis were past the nicety of asking for volunteers. Instead, they demanded that all non-essential Jews, which meant mainly the elderly and those without jobs, vacate their apartments and leave on the transports. That's funny, because that word essential has been thrown in our media since this all started. What's an essential job? What's an essential business? And so back in the day, again, the Nazis decided if you are not essential, meaning like you didn't have a job, you weren't contributing to the German war efforts, then you were considered non-essential and that you would be heading out. So think about all the people maybe in your family that aren't working essential jobs. I guess I'm really not essential, right? I'm a teacher. I guess I would be considered non-essential since I'm not working right now. Well, I kind of am right now. And my kids aren't essential. They're not working. They're teenagers. My grandparents, my parents. So think of all the people that would be transported out of the ghetto because they were considered not essential. They weren't important. So far, my father's work papers from Schindler's factory had protected our family from deportation, but the Luftigs were not as fortunate. With little warning, they were ordered to pack their belongings and report to the main square of the ghetto. There was no time to help them prepare, even to exchange goodbyes. As the deportation proceeded, I rushed downstairs to the shoemaker's apartment to get a street-level view of what was happening. Scores of our friends and neighbors, including some of the boys with whom I had studied Hebrew and watched the makeshift comedy skits, silently walked down the main street toward the train station. I peeked over the windowsill and searched for the Luftigs. Eventually, they trudged by, suitcases in hand. I meant to wave, to send them an encouraging sign, but I froze in fear when I saw the German guards marching beside them, prodding them along with their rifles. Mr. Luftig stared straight ahead, showing no emotion. Did he see me out of the corner of his eye? I couldn't tell. I could only hope. Gradually, the Luftigs disappeared from sight, swallowed in a sea of thousands. I remained in my spot by the window until the last of the deportees passed by. Then, with a heavy heart, I climbed the steps to our apartment. They're gone, I said sadly to my mother, telling her what she already knew. He left you this, replied my mother, handing me an old-fashioned glass-lined thermos bottle. Oh my gosh, seriously? Hold on a minute. Oh, all right. Seriously, I am so sorry. Think of it as a time you could. Oh my gosh, I'm locking the other dog out too. Okay. I'm back. I tell you. Hopefully, you guys. I know, Maddie. That's like my dogs are barking at absolutely zero, like nothing. Like, so anyway. So you can probably still hear them barking. So sorry about that. I tell you what. All right. So, yeah. So they left off, and Mr. Luftig left. Oh, and now my daughter's yelling. She's barking too. I don't even know. They should all quit and move to the country to grow and hunt food. They could get more food. That is true, but wait till you hear what happens, Lucas. Okay. Can you hear my dog still barking? Sorry about that. So let's see what happens. So he left you this, replied my mother, handing me an old-fashioned glass-lined thermos bottle. Then I pulled back the blanket separating our side of the room from the Luftig side and saw that he had left something else. His exquisite pipes, a tremor ran down my spine. Mr. Luftig had determined whatever his destination, he wouldn't be needing his pipes. It was a disturbing omen. A week later, the Nazis had another train waiting and began to round up more Jews. Evictions, they called them, not deportations. This time, the deportees didn't go quietly. Escapees from earlier deportations had fervently returned to the ghetto with stories of trains with people entering a camp and leaving empty, even though the population of the camp never increased. The more firsthand accounts we heard, the more we began to realize what was happening. It was terrifying. So the next time the Nazis started rounding up Jews, chaos erupted. Soldiers rampaged through the ghetto, demanding that people show the required identification and shoving anyone who couldn't. Hold on a second. Hey, Brooke. I'm reading live on YouTube. So the next time the Nazis started rounding up Jews, chaos erupted. Soldiers rampaged through the ghetto, demanding that people show their required identification and shoving anyone who couldn't into the streets teeming with fellow unfortunates. On June 8th, German soldiers burst into our building and once again forced their way into our apartment. They shouted, "Schnell, schnell! Fast, fast!" as my father shakily presented his work permit. He had gotten a Blauschein, a blue sheet or Gestapo-issued permit, added to his identification card, which we hoped would again exempt us all from deportation. Now that Salig was 17, he needed a Blauschein of his own. Tragically, he did not have one. If only we had the few minutes warning, we could have found a way to hide Salig, but it was too late. I felt my blood turning to ice when I realized they were going to take my brother. In a split second, the soldiers pounced on him. I wanted to scream, "No!" and leap to his rescue, but I knew it would be suicide, and I knew that I would be endangering all of our lives. The soldiers pinned Salig's arms behind his back and shoved him out the door. In the span of a minute, my beloved brother was gone. I have replayed those minutes in my head countless times. I know. I know. um, I replayed those minutes in my head countless times. We should have been better prepared. We should have had a hiding place and practiced to be ready for just such a situation. But the roundup happened to us as it did so many others in the ghetto without warning and no time to prepare or react. The shock of Salig's arrest hadn't even begun to register when he was already gone. 70 years later, I can still see him in my mind's eye as the Nazis dragged him from the room. So 70 years had gone by, and he can still see the Nazis taking his brother out of the room. In the film Schindler's List, there is a scene where Oskar Schindler rushes to the train station to save his accountant, Isaac Stern, who had been seized in a roundup. Schindler reaches the depot barely in time to yell Stern's name and pull him off the train just as it starts to move. What the film doesn't show is another scene that Schindler told my father about afterward. As he frantically searched the cattle cars filled with people looking for Stern, Schindler spotted Salig and recognized him as his worker Moishe's son. He called out to him and told him that he would get him off the train. But Salig was there with his girlfriend Miriam. Since no one in Miriam's family was working for Schindler, there was nothing he could do to save her. Salig told Schindler that he couldn't leave Miriam. That is the kind of young man he was. He wouldn't desert his girlfriend, even when it would have secured his own safety. In the next days, we heard that the train had gone to a camp named Belchek, where rumor had it people were being gassed. I remember wondering how long Salig would be able to hold his breath in the gas chamber. Will it be long enough to survive? All I could do was pray that somehow my dearest brother had been spared, or had found a way to escape. So, that is chapter 5. So sad. So that was his brother leaving, being taken out of their apartment. What's sad is that 70 years later, it means Leon's 70, he can still see his brother being taken out of the apartment, and what a horrible memory that must have been for him. So even through all of that, Leon does, again, like I said, lead a very productive, full life. Okay, so my dog heard your dog barking and ran to the door. Sorry about that. That's funny. I could have gotten like all the dogs barking. That would have been really fun. So that is the end of chapter 5. I hope you're enjoying it, or kind of in a weird way, I guess, enjoying the book. It is very, very interesting. So more is yet to happen. So his brother Salig is gone for now and going to the gas chambers, and not much chance of probably escaping that. But we'll find out later in the book as well. So on that being said, I hope you guys have a good day. Hopefully it's getting warmer. Yesterday was really chilly. I finished painting my room, so that was exciting. So without does anyone have any questions, any comments, anything? Aw, thanks. Hugs. All right. So wait, do I know who? Oh, Marin. There you are. Okay. Great. Marin, that's you. Thanks for my hugs again, Marin. My daily hugs. I love it. Hugging you back. Do you feel it? Okay. Well, I love you guys as always. Oh, and I didn't even say it again. Again, good afternoon, everybody, but it's also goodbye. So, I hope you guys have a great day. You know what I say. Have a good night. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.